Did he or she just happen to ditch you? And, well, the only important question is, are you missing them? Or, well, are you feeling as if you're missing them? Because, well, that's technically one of the more important questions. Now, I've been hearing people, friends, close people, even people I don't know about the street, fussing around, crying on the telephone, right? Speaking to someone else, sharing their, life burdens, that, someone actually gave up on them, they walked away and, they finally now are alone, right? As of what I heard, this is also called as ghosting, or I don't know, something like that, when someone simply vanishes and they don't give any sign. And many people are simply left aloof, right? And they constantly struggle, or they just ask themselves, why they're suffering, why they have been suddenly left. And the question is, are you actually suffering because of this? Because, well, technically this is what I'm gonna discuss a bit about. So there are lots of situations in people's lives where they find someone, they like them, probably they are liked back, but as I've been saying around for so many videos, most people follow impulses. And, well, this basically is nothing else than ignorance. And ignorance means accepting things without the necessity for either proof or using your discernment, whatever of the definitions I've been throwing around as of late. Well, any one of those applies. And of course, those are not necessarily the only ones. Now, when it comes to, fussing about he or she that left you, well, there is actually one single point. And this is basically the proof that you're not technically missing them, you're more like missing your own expectations of them. Now, when someone leaves, people always fail, or almost always fail, to understand one principle of life. And this principle of life is that everything in this existence is nothing else than, well, kind of a tool. Now, I'm not talking from a narcissistic or sociopathic or whatever personality distortion, okay? Not from any of those standpoints, okay? Because there are many people who automatically view people as, tools to be used. But ultimately, the only friend that you have in this life is your physical body. Now, the physical body technically has its own needs, and of course, sexual activity is one of those. But these needs, well, a need is nothing else than an impulse. It is an urge. Just like, well, the same way a need occurs, well, when you think that if you don't purchase a certain thing, thanks to advertisements, your life will be shit. Or, well, kind of starts feeling bad if you don't have that, because probably you're gonna miss out, people will judge you, or so many of these little parasites that exist in people's mind and they don't serve any purpose because, well, technically they are nothing else than mental parasites. So the point is, are you fussing about them having left? Well, this is already proof that you don't miss them, right? You just miss the expectations that you have about them. This might sound very, I don't know, may sound like a, in your face statement, or probably eye opening for some people, but simply put in life, everything is nothing else than a tool. Yes, everything in this life functions in a certain way, but not specifically for you, but functions in a certain way to ensure your greater being and, of course, your well being. Now, of course, we have created constructs like society and jobs and economy that, well, we're kind of using against our own selves, and at the same time, we are the ones accepting that, because why would we take responsibility to make the world a better place, right? It's better to simply allow ourselves to be trampled instead. So the point is, as I was saying, when people forget that their only friend is their physical body, well, that's kind of a problem, because many people identify themselves too much with ideas in their head. And when people live too much in their head, they never live in the present. When they never live in the present, they are susceptible to everything that the mind can spawn. Now, the mind can spawn a lot of things because the intellect supports everything that you believe, and at the same time, your imagination only works based on what you know. So the point is, if you let your imagination loose, considering this society is highly based on the mind, we gorge on upon, lots of movies, novels, scare stories, news, opinions, ideas, and the such. So it's always easy to simply lose ourselves to our imagination. Just like, in many relationships, right? People who are needy, they will never be able to be pleased, because people who are ignorant, people who live by impulses, they will never be pleased, right? It's what I call the little yandere construct, right? Or the little yandere syndrome. Why? Because, well, people tend to be a bit yandere-ish, right? I'm using this term because I'm betting it's more commonly known than other psychiatry-based concepts, but it's an aspect of this yandere genre, right, which is called codependency, right? Now, many people have different levels of codependency based on how much attention they needed in their life, because not everyone requires as much attention as others. Usually people who are more and more aware of things, people who are more and more, let's say, enlightened, because it's a fancy word, usually these people require less attention, because they know that attention is a currency, and you don't have a lifetime to simply give your attention to everyone. And there's also the other, the opposite one, the impulsive ones who want attention. So usually they will end up as people pleasers. But, well, with people pleasers, they will usually end up as the ones who demand being pleased, mainly because after slaving other people, right, you end up hurt or whatever, you no longer can do things, and most likely you will get a feel of what it's like to be, slavored around. So the point is, well, once you get a feel of what it's like to have people doing as you bid, most likely people will simply enjoy that circus, and they will probably keep up, pretending that they're sick, they always are needy. And this also draws a lot of attention, right? Because there's a lot of white knighting and, all sorts of ideas. So when such people end up in relationships believing that, they are in a relationship, as I've been saying, it never is important what the reality is, because, well, that is important for you, yes, but when you study other people, it's always important what reality they have in their own mind, right? Because ultimately, when you pay too much attention to the mind, you're kind of screwing yourself over, because ultimately the mind is a physical body's mechanism, right? And the physical body is good only at survival, right? It needs food, it needs reproduction, so ultimately it will only function based on its impulses, urges, and necessities. And these, let's call them basic instincts, will be quite a guiding principle in one's life. You can become, as enlightened as you want, but obviously sexuality and, the need to breed, and also because, well, technically sexuality doesn't have to be just about, having children, especially nowadays, but, you also have to eat, right? You also need safety. And of course, as a society, we are being bombarded with fear, right? Which is survival level number one, the survival of the body. And of course, a lot of twisted and awkward sexuality that keeps us always in a lower vibration. So the point is, everything is being trivialized today through, mainstream dumb shit, the television programs that present you all sort of trivial things, mundane aspects, news, and, people kind of, you're being invited to see people as objects, right? And, especially in video games, everything seems so easy. You press a button, you chop a tree. Everything that you do usually tends to feel so easy, especially in consumerism, where you no longer need to, go hunting for your meal. You just have to go somewhere, you pick the things that you want, and, well, you go to a counter, you pay, you go home, and, well, that's kind of it, right? So life has this shallowness around it, and people are very disconnected from their own emotions, because somewhere a huge virus has infiltrated in people's minds and gave them the impression that, they are, you know uh, good at what they're doing. Everything is as much as they know how to do, and what they know to do is the ultimate knowledge. There is literally nothing beyond that. And apart from that, it's always a bad thing to, show your emotions, right? Because how else can you be controlled, right? You always have to turn people against their own selves. That's basically a principle of black magic, or, well, call it manipulation if you want. Or well, the art of turning one's energies against themselves at one or multiple levels. Now, technically, you're creating cancer within someone through black magic, not necessarily at a physical level, but cancer means when something small or big within you turns against yourself. Just like people are making, a mental cancer, right? Everything that happens in their life, they always have contrasting views. And that is technically a fracturing, or you can call it a, cancerous moment, right? Well, actually, you can call it a cancer. And overthinking and stress and the such can actually lead to physical cancer due to the damage that the system, the ethereal system suffers, and slowly and surely it weaves itself into reality of the physical body. Now, when it comes to people, right, and their so-called relationships, many people, don't know what love actually is. And of course, there is another hideous concept that I've been discussing about. I think I made 1 or 2 videos about. It's called unconditional love, which is another nonsense, because there is no such thing as unconditional love. First of all, you need a physical body, right, to perceive this world, because if you don't have a physical body, you'll perceive this world differently, and most likely you don't need to breathe, you don't need to eat, so you don't have physical needs, you don't have a discerning mind, most likely. And well, so you can't love someone if you're not having a physical body. Well, also you need to be capable of using the physical body, so that is, you're not paralyzed or such. You need to actually have your mental body functional, because if your mind is gone, if your mind is cuckoo, well, guess what? C'est la vie with your love capacity. And then, well, so many more other aspects, right? You also need to find the right people, because discernment will say, I can't allow this, I don't like that, right? So there are actually many conditions the more you dive in. And of course, one has to also go through the BS, the belief systems, because those are more important than the proper reality as it is, when you take into account a certain individual, because you may see the reality in your own way, or you may be a seer and see things for that, the way they truly are. But ultimately, it's always important to get at least a glimpse of how people see things, right? Because when people are enamored, they will always see someone else as, far more than they are. And these expectations are basically the only thing that hurts you when that person is no longer. Because technically you're just a narcissistic little being, right? It's a narcissistic trait that you want to own things, right? People want to own things, and that also includes people, because the moment you find someone who is, suitable, right, who can fulfill your usually sexual fetishes, because that's basically why people so-called fall in love and like one another, is because, well, the moment they open themselves up to something which is usually sexual, or something which they both agree upon, it's like they instantly fall in love, which I kind of find cheesy, and it's like topic for some of the worst animes or movies possible, because, well, I kind of don't believe in love at first sight when it comes to, two people share the same interest and, they kind of fall in love. I mean, in a way, love is kind of a chemical hijack, because, once those hormones start, taking over the mind, if a person becomes impatient, they give up their discernment and they give up their patience, right? Well, they are just prey. Not to the other person, because most likely the other person is also an ignorant person that is prey to their own needs, therefore their own impulses. So two people who are, slaves of their own impulses will obviously fall together, because, well, ignorance means accepting everything without discernment, right? So two people will just, get along one with the other, and most likely the so-called relationship will go on for a while. People who are more aware will simply realize one very great lesson, which is people come and people go in your life. It's always been like this, and it will always be like that. Now, of course, many people argue that, hey, everyone has a lesson to give you, and, things like that. I kind of take this as cuckoo material, because, well, Some people will come into your life, will stay, and will leave. Some people, very few most likely, will stay with you until the end of your existence. But usually people come and people go. It's not necessarily that they have a certain lesson or something like that, because I kind of can't accept the fact that, things are, you know, preordained, because how can things be preordained if you have free will, right? Unless there's something guiding you from behind, right? They're giving you some nudges or impulses and you're still following those, but this kind of sounds cuckoo for me. So when a person simply leaves, usually they feel that they're no longer worthy, or you're no longer worthy for them, so they just choose to leave. Whatever reasons there are, many people simply suffer because of this. Well, the suffering only shows that they never cared for that person. The only thing they cared is the necessities that they felt the other person would, fulfill, right? Because when you are conscious, when you are aware of the fact that people come and people go, it simply becomes, unmoving for you. People, around you, the more aware you become more knowledgeable of things, like mortality. People around you will die. It can happen at any moment. It can happen today. It can happen tomorrow. It can happen the next second. People around you will simply die. And it's not that death should be seen as, this hideous thing that Christianity mostly has portrayed it as, but it can happen. When someone happens to perish, the less you suffer because of that. Ultimately, it is much better for you because, well, suffering in its own way is also karma, so most likely you don't want negative karma in your own life. And, well, while in many cases there is, a sense of a gap, an emptiness inside, because each person is given, let's say, they are allocated a certain part of you, right? When you care for them. The point is, yes, especially with parents and at certain ages, when one leaves you, there will be that hole that will be, hard to fill. But, well, when you find something to do and it's more important than you or what you think you are, right? When you are devoted to something, simply the fact that people will fade away, right? Will either perish or they will simply leave you. Well, the only thing you can wish them is that they live a life so good that they don't even have to remember you. Be it that you're gonna live a shit life or a good life. After all, that's only own responsibility, right? It is our responsibility to make our life better. Well, the point is, we don't necessarily assume that, but, the point is, happiness is an inside job only. So if someone leaves and you feel bad because of that and you second guess yourself, you believe you've been a horrible person, well, all this overthinking won't do you any good, except it will torment your, emotional and mental bodies, and it will give you probably a lot of headaches, which, if not taken care of, most likely can even dive you into several little problems, probably even bigger ones. But the point is, if you fuss about someone, that should be your proof that, you're actually missing what you thought they would feel in your life. But again, that thought is more or less a belief, right? When you feel that someone can fulfill something in your life, right, and it is a much greater relationship, right, a deeper relationship, you'll simply be able to meld with the other person. Probably you will take some of their aspects and you will share some of the knowledge and wisdom you have, because people who really like one another will also try to do, things together and learn from the other person, because it's always much better when you do things together, right? But nowadays you can't have two people, two ignorant people, shower together, except, cases in which they probably fuck, because, well, ignorant people will always give in to their urges, and, well, nowadays even medics tell you that, sexual activities are good to have even 2 or 3 times per week, or I don't know, certain statistics say whatever. I really can't care that much about what statistics say in most situations. So that is kind of problematic, because too much sexuality can help you in a good way but also has a negative impact, or may have, okay? depending on how suitable that person is and how ignorant that person is, because you're also sharing more than just, physical touches. Now, the point is, when you fuss about people, it just goes to show that, well, you're kind of a bit too ignorant. The problem that this will create is the more you think at a certain person or more persons, you're showing a neediness. This neediness will be present in your aura and it will show you as weak to other people, because the more you show yourself, or the more you exude yourself, let's say, as needy, well, your sense of power is kind of dwindling, right? It's going down. And of course, the more you think about other people, and especially overthink about people, the more you will feel, underpowered, right? It's like your center of attention is no longer you, right? So you're kind of gonna ignore certain things, all sorts of things, right? And you're gonna feel disempowered. So, as I was saying, when people simply go, it's not necessarily that it's time to go, but in many cases it's actually much better, because some cases are where people simply meet each other, and of course I'm not gonna dive into twin flames and the such, because I don't believe in such crap. I just see it as, fuzzy, cutesy propagandas from, New Age spiritualists who just seem to adore, distracting people from who they are with all sorts of stuff that most likely they invent, and they believe they are, God sent ideas. And, well, in some unfortunate cases, they're even making lots of money with all sorts of things. Now, I'm not condemning them after all, but, the point is, people have to become more introspective. The more introspective you become, you will see that the greater your, patience may also grow. And the more patient you are, the more resilient you also become to black magic, because black magic is all about turning you against your own self. And one of the common tactics is to simply make sure that whatever happens, you're constantly bombarded with things, right? Like the way society works. We are constantly bombarded with knowledge at school. We're not even allowed to process it, and we have to learn even more. When you're bombarded by advertisements, or, those pesky sellers who come at your house, preaching their, beloved objects, or, services, they always talk endlessly, because that's the whole purpose, to keep you distracted, right? So it's always about distraction, and distraction is also coming in the most common sense of, taking your attention away from you, right? Taking your attention from who you are. So if you meet such people who are needy, they won't miss you if you leave. The only thing they will miss is their expectations of you. Now, hopefully this video has been, well, I'm not the kind of inspirational video person, but, well, at least a bit eye-opening. So all this being said, well, you are appreciated. Take care of yourselves. Ferenc Jan Bohr signing out.